Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Politically Depressed. As always, I'm your host, Eamon McAdam. So, as the title suggests, and if any of you follow me on Instagram, you'll know that, my therapist broke up with me. I know that sounds a bit extra. I know I'm being a bit overly dramatic. It wasn't a breakup. I did hear some stories from friends of real therapist breakups, and it definitely was not that. But I'm sad. I really liked her. I was vibing with her. I felt like I was making progress. I was like looking forward to it being a long-term thing. But now it's over. Well, anyway, I am actually going to talk about it a bit seriously. What I was hoping of getting out of therapy, basically why I'm feeling so like kind of upset about it, and I don't know, kind of return to form a bit. This podcast is called Politically Depressed. I obviously do a lot of politics or talk a lot of political stuff. Talk about it in the context of being like fucking depressed and anxious all the time. But I figured this would be a space to like talk a bit more personally, um, quite literally about like my own path and journey, to kind of, address some of these things. And now with a new obstacle, how to find a new therapist. This therapist did suggest someone else, and I very well may reach out to them, but I'm gonna give my heart a bit of time to heal. It's good to joke. Anyway, so that's what this episode's gonna be about. On top of other things, but talk about, what happened, what I plan to do, and why I'm sad about it. Before I get into that, the announcement for today is my tip jar. If you like this podcast, if there's anything that I've said over the last year that has helped you in any way, illuminated something, made you feel seen, heard, or held, I would greatly appreciate your support by chucking a few pounds, quid, dollars, pesos, liro in the tip jar, which I'm using Ko-fi. It's in the description below. And 100% of the proceeds go to yours truly, or at least 90%, because Ko-fi, I think 95%. Anyway, that's my announcement. Headlines. Just before I got onto recording this, I was watching the press conference. It wasn't even a press conference, the filmed meeting between Zelensky and Trump and JD Vance. And I'm kind of shocked. It is very difficult to watch. It is an ambush. It's so brazen, bullying, ganging up. I don't know, I don't think I've ever seen anything like that. Has anyone I don't remember, not just in the Oval Office or in the US, just like generally, like the open bullying. It felt like a scene from, I don't know, like Succession. Succession obviously is modeled after whatever. It kind of does remind me of that scene. Actually, I don't know if this is spoilers, but basically where they intentionally try to like sabotage a deal by, like, they think they're being sly by like insulting the person. And here it just goes way beyond that. And obviously, sorry, fuck that. I'm not going to jump to TV shows. I think that's part of the problem of the discourse these days. This is a person who's the head of a country who is facing aggression from one of the world's largest imperialist powers. And, up until like a minute ago, like a chief ally to the US that are now essentially completely abandoning Ukraine. Again, I'm sorry, like I've got analysis, obviously, and I've also got analysis for the fact that like now with Trump and with this type of posturing, like the so-called leftist tankies are essentially advocating for the same thing Trump is, which I hope is a kind of eye-opener for them, but I don't think it will be. But I've never seen anything like that. That, like, it was so fucked up. It was so intense. There's just bullying, just yelling at him, and you're not being thankful, and you're disrespecting. You come here to the White House to talk like that, like how. It was really weird. It was really fucking bizarre. Like, I know a lot of us are very aware of Trump, and like he was president for 4 years, but I don't think we'd seen anything like that in the first term. And horrible. I mean, horrible, the actual implications for Ukrainians, for the world, really, as well. In terms of, we know that the US empire under Trump is not only going to be more emboldened, but also is going to embolden others because, I don't know. It's it was really fucked up. It's really actually hard to watch. And like Zelensky kind of like stands up for himself and tries to get her words in, but he's literally surrounded by just Americans, by Trump and JD Vance. And it was a shakedown. It just felt like the mob, And probably getting in the cameras was also intentional. I mean, obviously it was intentional because they did it. But yeah, like this is not just like a spectacle. So I don't know. This honestly has kind of shocked me. I was just watching and I was like, that's unbelievable. And like feeling that gut, whatever. Because I don't know. And for clarity's sake, like I don't know how anybody defends this otherwise if we're against imperialism. Russia invaded Ukraine. It did so in like 2014, 15 initially, but then more so in the last like 3 years. And peace means like, when Trump is saying, why don't you make a deal? And why is Zelensky so opposed to a deal? Is because a deal is basically just code for accepting the land that Russia has currently occupied, and sort of stopping there, but also why stop there? Like, there's not really an incentive to stop there. And that's not even what the Russians are saying. You know what I mean? Putin is not saying we just want this one concession or whatever. It's been a slow process over the last like decade. Anyway, I just wanted to share that as like a headline because this is quite fresh. I mean, this happened just a few hours ago. But yeah, don't really have any constructive thoughts outside of all that, except for the tanky thing, which I think is very interesting, but I just don't think that's going to matter much to them to find themselves literally in agreement with Donald Trump. Anyway, second headline for today. Israel sort of, like Netanyahu made official statements, explicit statements, that they want to stay in Syria, not just in the Golan Heights, which they have been occupying since 1967, but now with these territories that they've captured in the last, after the fall of Assad. Israel also conducted several airstrikes a few days ago in Damascus, in Daraa, in Qanaitra, and they're openly stating that they want to demilitarize the Syrian state. It's like we have entered a phase, really, wherein it's, you know what I mean? Like 1967, with the so-called preemptive strike, formed quite a debate. It's still debated to this day. I find it ridiculous. I think it's ahistorical. I think it is literally Zionist propaganda. But functionally now, everything that the Israelis do is pulled under that category. Quite literally. Like, to a fault almost. The new Syrian government under Shara has been quite kind of quiet on the new expansion of illegally occupied territories by the Israelis in Syria. And had been doing nothing but signaling kind of this rapprochement to the West and whatever. And even then, that was not like sufficient for the Israelis. Even then, even with like no signals of there being a growing threat or anything. And there is this thing of just like preventing any capability of any threat ever forming. And what we're really seeing is that this sort of security, the securitization of this region under Israeli hegemony means, what we in Lebanon have known for many years. They will never let us essentially be sovereign, be able to defend ourselves. And, it's really fucked up. But again, it's yet another signal of the fact that the rules of the game have shifted. That they are openly talking about a new order in the Middle East. And I find it very frustrating that the discourse has not shifted to match that sort of new reality. Like, again, just in the minimum, the thing that we can control, the discourse, or at least have influence over. This is something that I've talked about a lot, and I will talk about more. You know what I mean? Like, the monumental shifts that have happened over the last few months. I have not seen that same shift in the discourse. And it needs to. Again, not just with Trump, like I was saying in the offset, but now with this like a clearly emboldened... Sorry, I'm just looking at the camera. For some reason, the frame rates looked a bit weird, but it seems fine. Anyway, yeah, with this like emboldening U.S. imperialism in the region, Israeli expansionism, this ethno-state fascism, you know what I mean? And this like it's not even preemptive. I obviously don't believe in the concept of preemptive whatever, and in the ways that it's used by the Israelis. But that kind of logic, that everyone everywhere is suspect all the time. And the only ways that the Israelis can feel safe is if they bomb the shit out of the entire region. I don't know, it's fucked up. It's fucked up, and we'll see what'll happen. But that is something that's recently happened that has made me a bit more politically depressed. Anyway, those are my two headlines for today. Now I'm going to start talking about the main topic of today's episode. My therapist broke up with me. So officially, she has another project she had already been working on, but now has like a lot of new responsibilities. It seems like maybe they ran into some new funding. And yeah, because of her already commitments with that, she could no longer do sessions with me, which is sad because I was liking it. I was enjoying the therapy. I was appreciating it. I felt like I was making progress. But most importantly, for those who have listened to this podcast for a while, you'll know that I have a bit of a long history with therapy. And especially since indeed I started this podcast, because I think early episodes of season 1, I was talking a lot about how I broke up with my old therapist because he was white and a man and a cis man and a cis straight man and German. Also like weird kind of trad vibes going on. He had two children that were like 10 years old, and he was like my age or something. I don't know, it's fine. I'm not judging or anything. It just did not feel relatable. And I remember he once told me that he can relate to being an immigrant because he's a German living in Austria. And that was one of the first sessions with him, and I could not be like, that is not at all the same as my situation. Oh, boo-hoo. People kind of like snigger a bit when you, pronounce something very Deutsch, very German. Sad. Oh, you're living in a different German-speaking Central European capital? That must be so hard for you. That's what I was thinking at the time. But the hubris, the whiteness of a German in Austria telling a Lebanese in Austria, I know what it's like to be an immigrant. Whatever, regardless, beyond that, eventually I just did not feel fully safe, especially as shit hit the fan. I decided to stop that therapist. And in general, I wasn't really vibing. I'd went to him for like a year. And his practice, there was a lot of dismissiveness around some of my political intellectualizing, which I know I do have the tendency to intellectualize, to avoid thinking, or rather feeling, or like experiencing. But it got to a point of just, it was obnoxious. And especially when the war started, like, but what are you feeling right now in the room? Like, I'm frustrated because I want to fucking do something. And I'm frustrated, I don't know, like, frustrated that you lot aren't doing anything. Like, white Germans. Like, come on. Anyway, but yeah, it was a lot of just like kind of, it was Gestalt therapy. It was here and now. That's the point of it. But it just all felt like a load of, I don't want to say it, but I'm going to say it. Bullshit. Sorry, I don't know why that felt like a big thing to say. I've said much worse. But anyway, so that was a year ago. And since then, I'd been searching for another therapist. And a few months ago, I was very happy to see someone that I follow on Instagram posting, hey, do you want psychoanalysis from this Lebanese person, whose name obviously I will not mention? Contacted them, did a few sessions, really liked them, felt like a very familial vibe. Not only were they Lebanese, but they were kind of like cool and around my age, and I don't know. But also the psychoanalysis. I really liked it. In the last few sessions, I felt like I was making, those like early breakthroughs wherein, and I already do a lot of psychoanalysis with myself. Fuck, that's what this podcast is essentially. But like 40 minutes to sit and just kind of free association. Sometimes she'd ask a question that would like elicit different reflections. And eventually I got back into the rhythm of, even by myself after the sessions, I would kind of think more analytically about some of the things that I haven't been thinking a lot about. I don't know what the vibe is in this podcast. Like, for you listening, like, I know I do a lot of like self-analysis, but sometimes I feel like lately, especially, things have been too hard for me to do any of that real analysis. Like I reach a point of emotional burnout way before I can do any long-term, figuring out of the shit. And I think with the urgency of the present moment, when we're talking about war and genocide and imperialism, the personal gets lost a lot. And even though this is a space that I've made specifically so that I can talk about the confluence of those two things, there are some things that are like fully personal, that it's not like I don't want to share, but it's like when I'm airing these things, that's not where my mind goes to, or that's not where I think I want this episode to go with, or this analysis. But sometimes I do recognize the helpfulness of like using myself as a model, analyzing myself, not in a way that it's like I'm so important, and so you hearing my analysis of myself, unravels the deep, whatever tortured psyche that is me, but rather as almost like an example. I don't know. Basically, one of the last things that I was talking about with the therapist was feelings of identity, but also of like, how do I describe this? Like, I definitely did an episode not too long ago where I talked about like when the political is personal. Um, and like when you just spend a lot of time talking, free association, this is the whole principle of psychoanalysis, you do start to recognize certain patterns in your life. And certain patterns that are like, that just feel such bullshit. But we are bullshit. We're all bullshit. Like, how much some of my feelings of injustice and like the desire to act against injustice, some of it does come from like school days or like as a younger sibling. Like when I can track the earliest feelings of experiencing this feeling of injustice, it is like when I was a kid and my brother would do some bullshit and I'd go to my parents and I'd be like, he just did this thing. And they'd be like, yeah, but you probably also did something. Or you know what I mean? Or like they wouldn't punish him. And that feeling of being wronged, but also not having any avenues to do anything about it. And then, the avenues that are set, which is, my parents, them not doing anything because there's a conspiracy against me. No, you know what I mean? Like, and so I think, yeah, I talked about this in that episode, and I think Freud, that's like very interesting and very cool, and I think valid in a lot of ways, but I think he did have a tendency to like reduce all feelings of like social justice to that, which I don't agree with at all. But it's interesting and it's important to note and it's important to just like factor in. And if nothing else, and again, this is the conclusion of the episode, to be able to check it and be like, okay, that's me. And so I'm not going to project that onto whatever. But anyway, regardless. So yeah, one thing I was definitely talking with her about towards the end is it's not just identity, but for some reason, there are a lot of things that I hesitate to talk about that I feel like it's not that I feel it's not my place, but I feel like there's a vibe that's making me feel like it's not my place. And here I'm talking about things to do with Lebanon, and here very specifically to like things to do with Hezbollah. I think in the last live stream or in the one before, I felt very, very uncomfortable. In the last episode, yeah, it was like, I don't think I was saying anything wrong. I don't think I was saying anything harmful or hurtful, or that's sort of like doing the enemy's work for them. But I felt this very intense whatever. Hesitation. And that I'm going to get called out, and that I'm sort of like operating in a space that I shouldn't be. And, despite being Lebanese, but again, within Lebanon, it's not like pure, all Lebanese are of one mind, for example. But also there are some people who say that you cannot speak about Hezbollah unless you're Shia, unless you're from the south. And I find that very strange. But also, as someone who was raised, in an English-speaking school, who was quite Colin, like I think grew up in quite a like post-colonial kind of bourgeois family. I am much stronger in English. And so my attachment to Arabic is not, I didn't grow up that much with Arabic. And I do hesitate. I think this is like a thing that I mentioned with the therapist that I think was like a kind of, not breaking point, but an aha moment. Because it was like, I was thinking, what if I do just an Instagram story with me talking in Arabic? And I was like, no. And so that's precisely the thing that I appreciate most in therapy, is the kind of cycle of just sort of expressing and talking, free association, and then being confronted with a fact, a reality, an idea that makes you feel a bit uncomfortable. And then analyzing why you felt uncomfortable. What is it about that idea that made you uncomfortable? And so me, in the last like 6 years of my life, I've really worked on my Arabic. I'm very happy with myself. I feel very comfortable. Like growing up, I hated the language. Which again, as someone who's like in a bougie setting, and a lot of the people I went to school with just moved to the US, and like literally one guy is now like full on MAGA, even though his name is, damn it, I can't say his name, but it's very fucking Lebanese. It's not just very Lebanese, it's very Arab. Because some Lebanese names can be quite, I don't know how to describe it, French. But yeah, I mean, our last president, Michel. Anyway, but yeah, is that kind of thing of I feel like an imposter, or I'd be made to feel like an imposter. Like I feel comfortable with my Arabic, but it still has an accent, and it's an accent that points towards he's Lebanese, but he grew up abroad. He's Lebanese, his mother's foreign. And this is what I tell people in Lebanon. Whenever I'm in a service, in a cab, and the guy's making conversation, not like a cab here in the West, like it's sort of a mode of public transport. It is a mode of public transport. But anyway, would start, but you're Arabic, it's not, and so I just lie, yeah, my mother's whatever. Oh, okay, خلاص, not تعصبر. But so I do feel very embarrassed still. And I think why I've been thinking about this is because I noticed a lot of Instagram accounts by Lebanese people in the diaspora who speak much worse Arabic than me. Much worse. But all their videos are all in Arabic. And I know it's targeting a different sort of demographic who have different standards. But I think for me, the fear is, I mean, obviously having started so much with English and then doing Arabic, but it's the fear of then being seen as like an outsider. So if I have certain opinions, which I know a lot of people disagree with, but I think not only are correct or accurate, but is something a lot of people already say. It's not like my invention. But because I have an accented Arabic, there's like room for that ad hominem of like, it's obvious that you're, westernized. And so of course you would say that. But is that so bad? I mean, fuck it. I could just be like, no, fuck off. But what I noticed is that, and this was the last few sessions, and I was really hoping of like continuing with it and building off of it, is that feeling that my Lebanese identity could be given or taken away by any person, by any Lebanese person. Also, I just don't look it, and I think that's part of the thing. Like, and I have no control over this fact, but like literally growing up, my nickname was the German, L'Allemane. But so I don't know. People would kind of talk to me in English instantly. I don't know how to describe it. It's a lot of stuff, but essentially, I just, for some reason, still feel like hiding in the shadows. And kind of protecting myself on that front, because it feels like an accusation that it's just really fucking annoying. And so where I was getting at, and literally the last session before I got the email, was that I need to develop the sense of identity that is not strippable, that is sort of rooted within myself. Or at least within the communities that already accept and love me. This is why, for instance, I'm very involved with queer Arab communities, because they are de facto already rejected by the sort of heteronormative mainstream Arab, concepts of identities. But also because they have that space for like nourishment and love and whatever, even though in some ways it can get very fucking toxic. But regardless, that kind of, yeah. And so, you know what I mean? Like, this is something that I need to figure out. Because I can't be as vocal as I want to be. I can't be as open and earnest and powerful, while still having this thing holding me back, which is that fear of essentially being canceled, of being called out by members of my community. Not necessarily for the things I say, but how I say it, or rather it's an excuse. Anyway, that's just one of many things I was dealing with that therapist. On top of all of that, my issues with death, my issues with my issues with death are huge, and connect all of this because for some reason the feeling of being canceled in my mind, even though I have experienced it actually, not necessarily online, although an aspect of it was online, but is very closely linked to that feeling of death, the feeling that I won't be able to protect myself, that I'll be alone, I had a therapist who very interestingly once asked me, why am I afraid of death? And it took me a very long time because it was one of these questions where I was like, what do you mean? Why are you afraid of death? I'm like, well, why shouldn't I be? It's like, no, but why are you? I was like, because it's the worst thing that can happen. What do you mean, why are you afraid? And so it took a long time for me to realize that a big part of it is the fear of being alone. Like, what do I associate with death? It's the darkness, it's the loneliness, it's the emptiness, it's the, everybody dies alone. It's the only thing that you truly can ever experience with someone else. And that ties in very much so with like panic attacks that I used to have as a child, but also in a few years ago. I don't know, it's all very interesting stuff, but it's stuff that literally I didn't know I needed to work out, And I really like psychoanalysis as a method. And I'm very sad, and it's like, 13 sessions, which comes out to about like 9-10 hours of investment. And it's kind of just shitty, on top of everything else, just shitty that's like, it's not wasted, but it's kind of wasted. I learned stuff, I developed whatever, I've prepared for the next therapist or whatever, but it's not a choice I've made to stop these sessions at this point. And so it's just like shitty, but also sad. And hopefully this other person, I'll vibe with them as well. But I don't know. Also made me realize that I have not faced that much rejection in my life. Definitely as a writer, I've been rejected from many a grant and fellowships. But in terms of relationships, friends, and other, I've been pretty lucky over the last 12 years, or 10 years or whatever, ever since, I don't know, I graduated from school. The people who I want to be friends with seem to gravitate towards me, The people who I would have a crush on would also, you know what I mean? It just work itself out. If it didn't, then it turns out that, it wasn't meant to be, or whatever. And I was fine with it. But this is a rejection, I feel. And we did have a last session where I did share that with her. And she said that's totally normal. Not that I need her to approve that it's normal, but as in, just to note that I did actually mention this whole vibe that it feels like a breakup. Way. It took me so long. I thought she was the one. But I guess I'm not her one. Sad. But yeah, I don't know. I really appreciated having someone who comes from the same, who's Lebanese. For a while, I was just looking for someone Arab, or at least from the global south, someone who's at least familiar with societies ravaged by war and imperialism and colonialism, and kind of just gets that vibe. But having someone who's Lebanese was just so fucking cool, because I would literally be I would say a thing, when I first told her that technically English is my first language, and she looked a bit taken aback, really? And I said, yeah, I went to ACS, the school I went to, and she's like, oh, okay. Like, that's like 5 sessions with any non-Lebanese therapist, just in describing what it means to have gone to ACS, in the context of Lebanon, where like many schools are private, where a lot of the education is French speaking, but there's also English speaking, and that it's kind of normal, but also for the most part, like I am an extreme end of it, wherein like it's not just that I speak English very well, but I speak it with this American accent, and that I was so absorbed with it growing up that, you know, I thought I was white, essentially. And so I kind of rejected the Arabic completely in a way that a lot of my colleagues didn't. And I think parents and whatever had something more to do with it. But so, yeah. So just saying I went to ACS was like, okay, I get it. Like, so much time saved with that. I fucking love that. Or then, yeah, when talking politically, like, she knows when I said something that, like, this is something that I'm worried about saying online. And she'll be like, yeah, I get that, because it is a sensitive thing that, like, a lot of people, like, this, it instantly gets heated. I wouldn't have to explain why or anything. Or, like, what's the cultural context. Also, fun thing, I kind of spoke earlier in the middle of our sessions. And this is one thing I really appreciated that I'll kind of be implementing in the next, maybe, I'll see. But she was almost too familiar. There was a vibe that I was getting wherein she was like, kind of like a friend's older sister. Like, not literally, but I went to school with people who looked a lot like her. I went to school with someone actually with the exact same name. But so at a certain point, I think a few sessions in, I had already been thinking about doing this, but then she brought it up, like, do you want to maybe do this without camera? Oh, I should have mentioned, I don't know if this is clear, these were online sessions, because I cannot find anyone in Vienna. And I found that really funny, because I was literally about to suggest the same exact thing. And it's a very kind of like Freudian, or I mean, it's just a therapy thing, but it's like next level therapy. I just remember sketches from Monty Python, wherein, it's psychiatrist's office, door knocks, come in. Oh, Mr. Reginald Bobby Bottom III, you may enter the threshold. And then he comes in, like a sort of special condition for this one patient. And so, sorry, I don't know. I know most of my listeners are in the US, and British comedy doesn't fly well over there. But as I said, I grew up thinking I was white, so I know my Python pretty well. Anyway, so yeah, sad, but it's fine. I'll get over it. I'll maybe give it a few weeks and then try out this person that she'd recommended. And hopefully that'll be fine, and hopefully that'll be long-term, because these things are long-term. The issues we're currently dealing with, but also, I don't know, we're all very complex, petty people, all of us. And as much as I would love to think that some of my things are purely political and purely ideological, it's impossible. There's a lot of stuff that I haven't worked out. There's a lot of stuff that's still there. There's a lot of stuff that, even in the things that I'm dealing with now, I'm not recognizing how deep they are, or not giving them this space. And so, I don't know. I mean, in an ideal world, everyone has access to therapy, because it's so essential, and I realized it the last year when I wasn't doing it, the toll that it was taking on me. How much I was keeping inside, and even with this, but there's only so much I can get involved here, because it's still public. I want to be vulnerable, I want to share, but there are obviously things that I don't say. But one thing that's really nice, and I'll actually end it on this point, is a couple of days ago when I got the email and I wrote a story on my Instagram page, I got a lot of responses. And from a lot of people I've never met, but people who just listen to the podcast. And my favorite comments were these ones where it's like, oof, boy, it's been a really hard time for you finding a therapist. And it's like, I don't know this person, but yeah, it has been. And it's like, oh my God, yeah, because I fucking have this podcast, right? For a year, I've been talking about I need to find a therapist. I can't find a therapist. Why are there no therapists? They're all white, like Austrian therapists that I don't feel safe with in this city. Or people being like, oh, that sucks. It sounded like you were having a really good time. Again, because just listeners. Then people sharing their stories about therapists, and just all in all, just really loving. I love the responses. I thank you. If you reached out to me, I really appreciate it. And it just reminded me that, yeah, over the last year, I have built something, and it is kind of a community, at least around me, that I have sort of access to, and I really appreciate it. And yeah, it's not like this is not therapeutic. But anyway, I just wanted to say that I really appreciate it, and I thought it was really sweet, and it was just a lot of responses, and a lot of people sharing their stories. Um, yeah, so thank you for that. And yeah, again, hopefully the next one will be the one. I love the idea of the one. I posted a reel on my Instagram from Peep Show, this British comedy, sarcastically being like, yeah, live footage of my therapist dumping me. But I don't know, I just love this. I thought you were the one. Just, I don't know, he instantly falls in love with every woman he meets. Maybe she's the one. Just, I don't know, I find it hilarious. Anyway, I think I'll leave it there. Thank you again for listening. This has been another episode of Politically Depressed. If you enjoy this podcast, please consider heading over to patreon.com/fromtheperiphery and become a member for as little as $5 a month. With those $5, you not only help support this podcast and all the other ones in From the Periphery, but you also get access to a lot of exclusive content, such as my sub-series, Keep This Between Us, as well as early access to Fire These Times episodes and my video essay. In the future, I'll probably also put them up on Patreon early access. And if you can't do that, like and subscribe, leave a rating or a review wherever you're listening to this podcast. And most importantly, tell your friends, tell your family. Share this with someone you love. Anyway, again, thank you all for listening, and I'll see you all next time.